Hey guys, tonight we diving deep into the quiet power of 5 words that can change everything. That is not my responsibility. Picture this. It's late, your phone buzzes, and there's that familiar ping of guilt tucked between the words. Hey, I need you to fix this. It's kinda your fault anyway. Your stomach tightens. You stare at the screen, rehearsing explanations, apologies, even counter-arguments. But then you exhale and do something radical. You say, that's not my responsibility. And just like that, the ground shifts beneath their feet. You probably won't survive this week without these strategies. If this video gave you even one good moment, hit like and subscribe so we can keep hanging out. Tell me where you're retuning in from and what time it is on your end. It's kind of magical picturing all of us scattered across the world, thinking about the same thing at once. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You say it once, and it feels weird, like handing someone a coffee mug with no coffee inside. Awkward, defiant, maybe even a little mean. But then again, when was the last time you were offered peace in exchange for your explanation? See, the narcissist doesn't want an answer, they want an opening. They want responsibility to be this stretchable thing you carry on your back, so they never have to. But when you say, that's not my responsibility, you slice clean through the mess. You stop being their emotional janitor. Marcus Aurelius once said, you always own the option of having no opinion. There is never a need to turn this into something. Let that sink in. You don't have to carry what isn't yours. You don't have to pick up every invitation to guilt. You can just not. Take something simple. Your friend forgets their deadline, blames the group, hints that you should help clean up the mess. You feel the urge to soften it, maybe jump in, maybe defend. Instead, you breathe, look them in the eye, and say gently, that's not my responsibility. Suddenly, the script short-circuits. They were counting on you jumping in. That's the bait. That's always been the bait. They start spinning, wow, really? After everything I've done? You let that guilt breeze past you like wind across a stone. You stay grounded. What Stoicism teaches is this. Your peace is worth more than your reputation in a toxic person's head. When you stop holding the leaking parts of their life together, they flail harder, but that's not a reflection of you. That's what happens when an emotional parasite realizes the host is waking up. You might feel selfish at first, maybe even cold, but let's reframe that. Would you call a locked door selfish? Or is it simply a boundary? Let's talk about how this phrase works in the wild. Imagine someone at work keeps dumping tasks on you. You're so good at this. Could you just handle it? The praise softens the trap. You don't want to seem difficult, but deep down, resentment is building like mold in silence. Then one day, you pause and reply, I understand this is urgent, but that's not my responsibility. It doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest. And if they explode, if they try to shame you, that's not your responsibility either. Here's where it gets interesting. Once you start using this phrase, it becomes less about the narcissist and more about you. Your own clarity sharpens. You start seeing which fires you're not meant to put out. You stop being the fixer, the buffer, the always available emotional sponge. And in that space, your nervous system takes a deep breath for the first time in years. A modern Stoic doesn't chase validation. A modern Stoic stands in discomfort, unmoved, even when the narcissist storms. Because truthfully, nothing enrages them more than a target that doesn't flinch. And let's be real, there's always going to be someone who thrives on guilt. But just because someone throws you a backpack full of bricks doesn't mean you're re-obligated to carry it to the finish line. Here is a question to sit with tonight. How much of what you re-stressed about isn't even yours? Seriously. Look at your day. Look at the text threads, the mental clutter, the sleepless nights. How many of them come from carrying burdens you were never meant to lift? You didn't ruin their mood. You didn't create their crisis. You didn't fail them by prioritizing yourself. They just got used to you being available at your own expense. That's not nobility. That's burnout with a halo. So next time someone tosses their mess into your hands and waits for your panic to kick in, say it softly. Say it calmly. Say it even if your voice shakes. That's not my responsibility. Then walk away not from them, but toward yourself. You'll be amazed how fast the drama dries up when the sponge stops soaking it. You'll notice the silence that follows. It's not empty, it's sacred. It's the sound of power returning to its rightful place. And they will notice too. They'll see the difference. And some won't like it, but the ones who truly respect you, they'll adjust. Because when you make peace with disappointing the wrong people, you finally make room to honor the right parts of yourself. You say, you're entitled to your opinion, and suddenly, their performance hits a wall. See, narcissists don't just want control, they want submission. They need you to squirm, to defend, to explain yourself into exhaustion. They crave your energy like a moth craves flame. But when you shrug, lean back, and say those 6 words with soft disinterest, it's like yanking the curtain back on Oz. You're entitled to your opinion? Translation? You're allowed to speak, but I'm not dancing. There's something beautifully infuriating about that sentence for someone who feeds off your emotional reaction. It doesn't resist. It doesn't argue. It doesn't engage. It just ends. Picture it. They throw out some passive-aggressive jab at a family dinner. Maybe something like, well, some people just don't know how to handle real stress. You don't blink. You don't flinch. You just take a sip of your drink, smile faintly, and say, you're entitled to your opinion. It's like handing them a rubber knife when they expected a sword fight. Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And nowhere is that more true than in conversations with narcissists, because they throw bait, not arguments. They want the show. But when you calmly acknowledge their right to think whatever twisted version of events helps them sleep at night, without needing to validate it, they lose their leverage. Let's talk about real-life scenarios. A coworker corners you in the break room, implying you're not pulling your weight. You know you've carried more than your share, but arguing feels pointless. So you say, you're entitled to your opinion. Not sarcastic, not icy, just neutral. Then you return to your lunch. It feels so small, right? But it's seismic. Because what you're doing is rejecting their invitation to the ring. You don't throw a punch. You don't even lace up your gloves. You sit this round out completely, and somehow, that's more powerful than any comeback. It also reveals something else, their desperation. When a narcissist sees their old triggers failing, they push harder, they escalate, they test. They might say, wow, you really don't care, do you? And here's the truth. You care deeply, just not about managing their opinion of you anymore. That's the distinction. You're no longer outsourcing your peace to someone who misuses it. Here's the thing about opinions. Everyone has them, and most are projections dressed up as facts. The Stoic path isn't about silencing others. It's about not letting noise contaminate your clarity. Now ask yourself this. How often do you let someone's opinion become your internal soundtrack? It happens subtly. A side comment becomes a shadow over your day. A raised eyebrow rewrites your confidence. A single judgment echoes louder than your own voice. But when you say, you're entitled to your opinion, you pause the cycle. You create a buffer. You choose detachment, not defensiveness. And that difference matters. It's like being handed a rotten apple and choosing not to eat it. You don't throw it back. You don't lecture the person who gave it to you. You just set it down and walk away hungry for better fruit. And let's be honest, some opinions are meant to poison you. You'll hear things like, you always overreact, or you never take responsibility, or people don't like being around you. And instead of spiraling into apology or outrage, you say, "You're entitled to your opinion," and you exit the stage. Not because you're weak, but because you finally know your value doesn't live in their perception. You are not their version of you, and they hate that. They hate that you've stopped handing them the pen to write your story, that you've stopped treating their approval like oxygen, that you've learned the gentle, devastating power of letting them be wrong without needing to correct them. It's not about ego. It's about boundaries wrapped in grace. Even the tone matters. Say it lightly, casually, like you're declining an invitation to drama you've already seen too many times. And if they push back, so you just don't care, you smile, you breathe, you remind yourself, this isn't about them understanding. It's about you stopping the cycle. Caring doesn't mean explaining. It doesn't mean performing emotional CPR every time someone flatlines in self-awareness. You say, "You're entitled to your opinion," and you leave the room cleaner than you found it. Over time, something beautiful happens. You start hearing opinions everywhere, and none of them stick. You become Teflon. Not numb, not cold, just untouched. Because the only voice you owe loyalty to is the one inside you. And that voice? It's finally getting louder. There's a moment when someone says something untrue or unfair, and you no longer feel the urge to fix their version of you. That's freedom. That's emotional adulthood. That's stoicism with teeth. Remember, someone can misunderstand you, disapprove of you, even dislike you, and still you remain whole. So next time someone flings their opinion like it's gospel, you nod, you stay calm. You channel Epictetus and your own quiet strength, and you say, "You're entitled to your opinion." Then you go make your coffee, or return that email, or water your plants. Because life is too precious to waste translating yourself for someone committed to mishearing you. You say no, and the air gets thick. It's strange how one syllable, two letters, barely a whisper, can unravel someone who's built their power on your constant yes. But there it is, quiet, firm, non-negotiable. You say it without excuses. No soft cushion after, no nervous laugh. Just the word, no. And suddenly, you've committed the cardinal sin in a narcissist's playbook. You've reclaimed your autonomy. It doesn't matter what you're declining. An invite, a favor, a late-night emotional dumping session, disguised as just needing someone to talk to. The moment you say no, without dragging in your entire childhood to justify it, you become dangerous. As Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And there's a unique kind of bravery in declining to explain yourself. The narcissist isn't just startled, they're insulted. See, your no doesn't just stop the conversation. It reveals a boundary they didn't know existed. And that makes you unpredictable. Unpredictable people can't be controlled. You'll see it fast. Their face shifts. Maybe it's a smirk. Maybe a full-blown tantrum. Maybe it's the classic, "Wow, I didn't know you were so selfish now." Selfish. There it is. The word meant to shame you back into submission. But you're different now. You've stopped equating worth with compliance. You've stopped confusing being liked with being respected. You've stopped seeing your refusal as a flaw to fix. Let's walk through a moment. It's late. You're exhausted. Your phone lights up. "Hey, I know it's last minute, but can you help me with something? It'll only take an hour." The old you might have hesitated, calculated, replied with a "sure, I guess." But tonight, you reply with "no." No smiley face, no apology. Just no. You set the phone down and feel the quiet settle in your chest. That's power. Real power. Not the kind that flexes or fights. The kind that gently, unapologetically declines. There's a beauty in recognizing that your energy is not a public utility. And the ones who truly love you, they don't flinch at your no. They respect it, because they know it makes your yes mean something. But narcissists? They spiral. They question. They corner. They demand a reason, because a no without explanation sounds like rejection to their ego. It bruises them. And in that bruising, you see the truth. They never wanted a favor. They wanted control disguised as closeness. Here's a modern Stoic truth bomb. Saying no doesn't require permission. It's not rude. It's responsible. Now ask yourself, how many of your past yeses were really just fear wearing politeness like a mask? You know the kind. The agreement you made to avoid conflict. The favor you did while swallowing resentment. The sure you gave with a smile, but a stomach full of dread. Those are emotional debts that stack up fast. And each one chips away at your sense of self. But one clean no, it resets the ledger. And yes, the first few are messy. You might overthink it. You might follow up with a flurry of clarifying texts. I'm just super tired. I didn't mean it like that. We'll hang soon. But eventually, the muscle strengthens. You start saying no the way Stoics faced storms, without flinching, without panic. Because you realize, peace doesn't require pleasing everyone. In fact, peace often starts where your fear of being disliked ends. Imagine being at a party. Someone tries to pull you into a shady conversation or guilt trip disguised as fun. You smile and say, "No thanks." They press, "Come on, don't be boring." You shrug. Still no. And you walk away. No debate. No shame. It's almost funny how rare that kind of calm refusal is. In a world obsessed with explaining every boundary, the quiet confidence of no feels like a revolution. And here's the kicker. It teaches people how to treat you. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you train them to expect access. But when your no becomes consistent, kind, and firm, you set a new standard. The narcissist may test you. They'll guilt, gaslight, maybe even play the victim. But they can't argue with a boundary you refuse to negotiate. Because no is a full sentence. It says, "I trust myself to disappoint you if I must." It says, "Your approval isn't my compass anymore." It says, "I exist outside your agenda." No isn't cruelty. No isn't rejection. No is clarity with edges. So tonight, ask yourself this. Where in your life have you said yes just to survive? Think about it. The unpaid favors. The endless quick calls. The emotional labor. The tasks that hijack your calendar and your mind. Now imagine the space you'd reclaim if you started saying no when your body already whispered it before your mouth betrayed it. That's what Stoicism gives you. Not cold detachment, but warm integrity. No becomes an act of alignment. So practice it. In the mirror. In your mind. Then in real life, say it without tone, without tension. Just say it. No. Not now. Not ever. Not again. Let them fear it. Let them notice it. Let them realize the version of you that once needed their approval no longer answers the door. You say, "I don't explain myself anymore," and the entire game falls apart. That's the moment when the narcissist realizes they've lost the playbook. Because you were never the problem. You were the script. And once you stop feeding them lines to twist, everything collapses. Let's break this down gently. You've probably spent years turning every decision into a PowerPoint presentation of justifications. I can't come tonight because I had a long day, and I haven't slept, and my dog looks sad, and I gone. You want to be rude, but stop. Just stop. You owe no one a novella to earn your no. The minute you stop explaining, you stop giving them handles to pull you around with. Epictetus once said, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it." In this case, your philosophy is self-respect, boundaries, stillness. So stop talking about it and be it. Let us say you turn down a dinner invite from someone who always makes digs at your life. Before, you'd soften it. "Sorry, I have to work late. I've got deadlines. Hope we can reschedule." That's the old script. But now, You simply say, "I'm not coming." They prod. You don't flinch. They ask why. You smile. You shrug. "I just don't explain myself anymore." Now the silence has weight. That pause? It's devastating. Not to you, but to them. Because they're used to the dance. They're used to your need to be understood, to be liked, to justify your space in the room. But once you pull that plug, the power drain begins. When you stop explaining, you become an emotional minimalist. And narcissists hate minimalism. It gives them nothing to weaponize. Think about how often you've talked yourself in circles to prove you meant well, to prove you're not selfish, to prove you weren't being difficult. And where did that ever get you? Anywhere but exhausted? Explanations aren't inherently bad, but with toxic people, they're currency. And once you realize you've been overspending your energy trying to clarify things they never cared to understand in the first place, you stop. You stop performing. You stop justifying. You stop believing that understanding equals safety. Now imagine this moment. You set a boundary. Something small. You decline a call. You say no to a favor. And they say, "Seriously? Why not?" You breathe in slowly. You exhale. "I don't explain myself anymore." Boom. Earthquake. They laugh awkwardly. You've changed. Yes, you have. You've started living like your time belongs to you. Here's where the stoicism kicks in. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." You don't explain anymore because it doesn't serve what's true, what's right. It only serves their story, and you've stopped auditioning for roles in their script. This shift is seismic not just for them, but for you. You realize how much of your anxiety came from trying to manage other people's reactions to your choices, and how liberating it is to finally just live. Let's look at a relatable scene. Your sibling calls you, again, to dump emotional weight. You love them, but it's always one-sided. You answer, this time more grounded. When they slip into complaints, you gently say, "Hey, I'm not available for that tonight." They snap. "What's that supposed to mean?" You respond with peace. "I don't explain myself anymore." And just like that, you exit the guilt trap. Now let's be real, this doesn't come easy. You might feel guilty, arrogant, even cold. Because for so long, your identity was wrapped in being nice, reasonable, understanding. But Stoicism teaches something revolutionary. Nice isn't always kind. Reasonable isn't always just. Understanding doesn't mean self-erasing. By refusing to explain yourself, you're not being difficult. You're being definitive. And here's the secret: this sentence protects your nervous system. Because once you open the door to explanation, narcissists wedge it open with counterpoints, accusations, guilt, fake concern. You start defending what doesn't need defending. You get trapped in debates that aren't meant to resolve, only to confuse and control. But "I don't explain myself anymore" is clean, sharp, sealed. You're not rude. You're just ... untouchable. Over time, this phrase becomes a form of self-trust. You don't second-guess your boundaries. You don't rehearse your lines. You move through life with a kind of quiet conviction. This is where your power blooms, not in louder arguments, but in less availability for nonsense. Ask yourself now, how often do I explain myself just to stay liked by people I don't even respect? It's a brutal question, but honesty is the Stoic mirror. And when you answer it, you realize being misunderstood is better than being drained. So you practice, not coldly, not defensively, just calmly. You say, "I don't explain myself anymore," and you watch the world around you adjust. Some will respect you more. Others will rage. Let them. Because the ones who truly care about you, they don't need long speeches. They hear the clarity in your silence. The ones who depended on your insecurity, they'll either grow up or go away. And either way, you win. You get your energy back. You get your focus back. You get yourself back. And in a world that demands you explain, over-apologize, and prove your worth at every turn, that quiet refusal, that simple statement, it's nothing short of revolutionary. You say, we see things differently, and suddenly, the narcissist loses interest because you've just ended the argument they were dying to win. Not with volume, not with evidence, not with emotional breakdowns or detailed timelines or a desperate appeal to logic. You end it with grace, with neutrality, with a sentence so disarming they don't know where to aim their next shot. We see things differently. That's it. No sarcasm, no flinch, just a gentle, undeniable truth. The power of this phrase is subtle but seismic. It pulls you out of the quicksand of defending your perspective to someone who never wanted to understand it in the first place. You exit the courtroom without saying another word, and you let them rant alone. As Marcus Aurelius put it, you always have the option of having no opinion. But even more powerful than having no opinion is refusing to fight over one. See, narcissists don't want to see the world through your eyes. They want you to collapse into theirs. They need your reality to mirror theirs, so they feel valid, justified, superior. But when you say, we see things differently, you are not conceding. You are not agreeing. You are simply detaching. You stop treating disagreement like a crime scene that you have to solve. You don't scan for evidence. You don't replay the conversation 100 times in your head. You say those 5 words, and you reclaim your mental peace. Let's step into a relatable scenario. Your partner brings up a fight from last week. They insist you were being passive-aggressive, that you started the tension, that you always twist things. And deep down, you know, this isn't about clarity, it's about control. You take a breath, and you say, we see things differently. Just like that, you drop the rope. They pull. You don't. They poke. You blink. They ramp up, hoping to provoke. But you already gone emotionally and mentally because you no longer treat disagreement as a problem that needs to be fixed. You don't fear misalignment anymore. You've accepted what the Stoics always knew. Harmony doesn't mean uniformity. Agreement isn't a requirement for peace. Here is a question to sit with tonight. Why do I need people to see things the same way I do in order to feel secure? It's a tough one. Because sometimes we're not seeking understanding. We're chasing validation. We think, if they just saw it like I do, I'd feel better about my choices. But that's a trap. Because someone can understand your perspective and still weaponize it, still twist it, still use it against you. But we see things differently leaves no room for that. It doesn't open a door for debate. It simply acknowledges the rift and accepts it. Let's be clear. You don't use this phrase to shut down honest conversation with healthy people. You use it when you know deep in your bones that someone is arguing with you just to win, not to grow. That's when you exit. Picture it like this. They throw their argument like a grenade, and you respond by not even stepping onto the battlefield. You stay on your side. You build a bench. You pour a drink. You breathe. They'll accuse you of dodging, of being too sensitive, of never being able to talk things through. Let them. Because what they really saying is, I can to manipulate you if you want to fight back. And they're right. The fight ends the moment you stop needing to be understood by someone who only listens to distort. You'll notice, too, that your tone changes when you use this phrase. It's not defensive anymore. It's not laced with desperation. It's quiet, settled, like you've accepted the weather and chosen to walk with an umbrella. Over time, we see things differently becomes a doorway to emotional peace. You use it with coworkers who love to gossip, with family members who can't stop bringing up the past, with exes who want to rehash every wound. It's a release valve. It doesn't end the conversation. It ends your participation in the chaos of it. There's elegance in that. Poise. It says, I value peace more than being right. And ironically, that makes you unshakably grounded. You stop craving the last word. You stop needing closure from people who can't even close their own wounds. You stop being seduced by the illusion that more talking will lead to more understanding. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes they aren't capable. Sometimes they aren't willing. And sometimes they just don't care. That's when this phrase becomes your anchor. You say it, and it stings them. Not because it's cruel, but because it's true. Because you're no longer up for debate. Because they can't lure you into the exhausting labyrinth of proving yourself. You've outgrown the need to win. You've outgrown the stage. And without an audience, the narcissist folds. So next time someone tries to bait you into a fight you didn't sign up for, a debate you didn't ask for, or a guilt trip you've already taken 100 times, don't raise your voice. Don't raise your blood pressure. Just say softly, "We see things differently." Then go on with your day. Read your book. Make your tea. Put your phone on silent. And let their storm pass without you standing in the rain. You say, "I'm not available for that." And just like that, you stop being their backup plan, emotional doormat, or last-minute lifeline. You don't make excuses. You don't offer a rain check. You don't overcompensate with guilt-laced explanations. You just say it quietly, clearly, unapologetically. I'm not available for that. It's not a rejection of the person. It's a declaration of your space. And narcissists hate it. They thrive in the gray zones of your schedule, your energy, your attention. They bank on your availability as if it's a birthright. But when you close the shop and hang the sign that says "not open," they don't just get annoyed, they panic. Why? Because for the first time, you've introduced scarcity. Seneca once wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve." The process is mutual. That's not what's happening with narcissists. There's no mutuality. Just a one-way pipeline where your emotional labor leaks out into their convenience. But now, you're blocking that flow. You're no longer on call. Let's imagine something familiar. It's a Saturday morning. You're deep in something that finally feels like yours, maybe journaling, maybe making breakfast, maybe scrolling in total silence with zero guilt. Then the text comes in. "Can you call me right now?" It's urgent. You pause. You know this game. The emergency is never life-threatening, just ego-threatening. They want a listener, a fixer, a sponge. And you just aren't available for that anymore. You reply with the new standard. "I'm not available for that." No period of availability. No, maybe later. No invitation to try again tomorrow. You didn't cancel, you never agreed. There's power in that. Because it doesn't say no with hostility. It says no with sovereignty. The phrase is surgical. It doesn't cut people down, it cuts the cord. Let's look at how it shows up in other spaces. A coworker slides extra tasks onto your desk with a smile. "You're so good at this. Could you help?" "I'm not available for that." A family member wants to loop you into drama from 2004. "You need to talk to your cousin. This can go on." "I'm not available for that." A friend tries to use you as an emotional punching bag after their 5th breakup this year. "I just need to vent. I'm losing it." "I'm not available for that." And yes, they'll test your tone. "What happened to you? You used to be there for me." They'll say it like you've betrayed something sacred. But deep down, you've only betrayed the version of yourself that never got to rest. That's not cruelty. That's healing. You've stopped being a lifeguard for people who keep jumping into emotional pools with no intention of learning how to swim. It might feel foreign at first. You're used to fixing, to smoothing, to being the strong one. But you're not a utility. You're a person. And your energy has a limit. Ask yourself this: who benefits most when I'm always available, and what happens to me when I pretend I have no limits? Because it's not just about your calendar. It's about your mental inbox, your bandwidth, your nervous system. If you're always on call for everyone, you're off duty for yourself. Narcissists prey on that. They watch for hesitation, for empathy, for that microsecond where you think, maybe I should. That's the hook. But when you respond with, I'm not available for that, you break the cycle. You become unpredictable. You become a closed circuit. It might ramp up. Are you seriously ignoring me? You're not. You're protecting yourself from emotional overdraft. You're saying, I'm not a bottomless cup. You're saying, I don't owe anyone an instant response. You're re-saying, just because you re-loud doesn't mean I have to listen. And the peace that follows? It's thick. It's real. It's earned. The first few times you might flinch after. You might doubt yourself. That's conditioning. That's what happens when your worth has been tied to being accessible. But keep going. Say it again. Softer. Stronger. I'm not available for that. It's not mean. It's not petty. It's how you protect the parts of yourself no one else sees. You don't need to convince them it's justified. You don't need to follow it up with a novel. You let it stand. They will adapt or they won't. Either way, you remain whole. And here's the hidden beauty. The more you say it, the less you attract the ones who abuse it. Suddenly, your life isn't full of emergencies that don't belong to you. You start attracting people who respect your time. You build a life with space for stillness. You find out what it feels like to be on your own schedule. You meet yourself again. And this time, you're not interrupted. You say, that doesn't work for me. And for the first time, the narcissist is forced to face a version of you they can't bend. This phrase is gentle. It's not aggressive. It's not dramatic. It doesn't raise its voice. But make no mistake, it's unshakable. That doesn't work for me. It's the quiet refusal that sets the whole house of cards fluttering to the ground. Because what does a narcissist fear most? Boundaries that don't budge. Limits that don't move. People who say no and mean it. And this phrase? It's the softest sledgehammer you'll ever carry. Let's set the scene. They pitch a plan that sounds reasonable on the surface. Maybe they want to meet just to talk. Or they want you to be fair and give them another chance. Maybe it is a classic guilt trip dressed up in concern. I just want what is best for both of us. But inside, you know it's a trap. They want access, not connection. They want compliance, not resolution. So you breathe, and you say it clearly. That doesn't work for me. You don't justify. You don't explain. You don't scramble to rearrange your life or values to accommodate their comfort. You just hold the line. There is a quote from Marcus Aurelius that fits perfectly here. If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed. But the person who continues in self-deception and ignorance is harmed. And narcissists? They thrive in that self-deception. Your clarity is their disruption. Because that doesn't work for me removes the argument entirely. It centers the conversation around your experience, not their excuses. Let's try this in a more everyday moment. A friend invites you to an event where your ex will be. You've made it clear before. No contact. But here it is again, the pushback. Come on, just be civil. Don't make it a big deal. You smile. No bitterness. Just truth. That doesn't work for me. That's the end. Not up for debate. And the best part? You're not even mad. You're not in defense mode. You're not making them the villain or yourself the victim. You're just stating a boundary without needing to burn the whole bridge. It's surgical. It's mature. It's stoic. Because the Stoics understood that strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about mastering yourself. And mastering yourself includes the ability to say, that doesn't work for me, without guilt, flinch, or explanation. Now ask yourself this. How many times have I said yes to things that didn't work for me, just to avoid discomfort? It might be subtle. A meeting you didn't need to attend. A relationship you should have let go months ago. A task you didn't have time for, but took on anyway, because you couldn't bear the thought of letting someone down. And what did that cost? Time, energy, sanity. But when you start using this phrase, you step into a different timeline. One where your needs aren't a burden, they're a compass. And here's what is beautiful. That doesn't work for me, doesn't slam a door. It just means you're not going to twist yourself into shapes for someone else's comfort anymore. Sometimes they'll try to negotiate. They'll say, well, what would work for you? Be careful here. That question can be a trap. Narcissists aren't seeking solutions. They're looking for loopholes. So you stay rooted. If you want to offer an alternative, you can. But you don't owe it. Because that doesn't work for me is not a prelude to compromise. It's a complete sentence. It says, I don't betray myself for convenience. I don't dilute my peace to fit your chaos. I don't rewrite my values to keep the peace, especially when I'm the only one making the effort. This phrase also makes you more aware of how often people expect you to bend. How often your silence has been mistaken for agreement. How often keeping the peace has actually meant sacrificing your own. And when you use this phrase consistently, you'll start to notice something. Respect. It may not come from the narcissist. They're likely to withdraw, sulk, lash out. But you'll see it in others. In the way people pause when you speak. In the way they ask, instead of assume. In the way your space no longer feels like a public sidewalk. Everyone tramples without notice. That respect starts with you. Because you've stopped asking for permission to protect your energy. You've stopped running your boundaries through a focus group. You've stopped hoping people will get it if you just explain enough. You've moved beyond that now. So whether it's a pushy boss, a manipulative parent, an overreaching friend, or a narcissistic ex, the next time they ask you to do something that doesn't sit right in your bones, you don't delay. You don't negotiate. You don't dilute. You say it clearly, kindly. That doesn't work for me. And you let the silence do the rest. You say, let's agree to keep some space. And just like that, you shut the revolving door they always assumed would stay open. This isn't said in anger. There's no drama. No scene. You're not storming out or slamming anything shut. You're doing something far more unsettling to a narcissist. You're stepping back without asking their permission. This phrase signals one thing loud and clear. You no longer see proximity as necessary. And when it comes to narcissists, distance isn't just an inconvenience. It's a threat. Because closeness is their currency. Proximity gives them a stage. If they're near, they can perform, manipulate, disrupt, rewrite the script. But distance? That's silence. That's boundaries. That's you out of reach and them out of power. And when you calmly say, let's agree to keep some space, you deliver the one message they can misinterpret. You've stopped playing the game entirely. Let's walk into a familiar situation. You've been through the cycle, the hot-cold dynamic, the love bombing followed by the ghosting, the compliments that always have a hook hidden beneath them. Maybe it's a family member, maybe an ex, maybe someone who says they care, but your stomach tightens every time they message you. And one day, they show up again. A text, a thinking of you, a call, the old you would have melted, replied, danced around the discomfort to keep things civil. But now, you respond with something that's deceptively simple. Let's agree to keep some space. And in that moment, you're free. There is a quote from Epictetus that slides into this perfectly. Keep your attention focused entirely on what is truly your own concern. And be clear that what belongs to others is their business and none of yours. And when you create space from a narcissist, you are finally doing just that. You stop trying to manage their moods. You stop absorbing their crisis. You stop making their chaos your calendar. Because space isn't a punishment, it's a filter. It shows you who gets upset when they no longer have access to you. They might accuse you of being cold, selfish, distant. But what they're really saying is, I don't know how to function without the version of you that always let me in. And here's the truth. It's not about hating them. It's about loving yourself more than you love your own pattern of self-betrayal. Space lets you breathe. It lets you remember what your own voice sounds like, unfiltered through their manipulation. It's how you stop living on emotional call. Now let's talk about how you say this. Not in a rage text at midnight. Not during an explosive fight. Not dripping with sarcasm or laced with guilt. You say it gently, steady, like, hey, I think we both need some time to reset. Let's agree to keep some space. And then you follow through. You don't check their stories. You don't ask mutual friends what they're saying. You don't fall into the trap of thinking that your peace is cruelty. Here is a hard but freeing question. Who would feel most threatened if I stopped explaining my boundaries and just enforced them? You already know the answer. And it is not about being the bigger person by letting them stay close when their presence burns holes in your day. It's about being the clearer person, the one who doesn't confuse tolerance with healing. This phrase is also brilliant because it doesn't invite a counter-argument. You're not saying, I'm cutting you off forever. You're saying, let's pause. Let's step back. Let's breathe. But here's what the narcissist hears. You no longer need me to define your peace. And that, to them, is unbearable. They will try to close the distance. With guilt. You're pushing everyone away. With pity. I'm really going through a lot. With pressure. This is how you treat people who care? Stay calm. Your job is not to be misunderstood less. Your job is to be misunderstood and still hold your ground. Let's agree to keep some space. It's mature. It's direct. And most importantly, it's done for you, not against them. You are not the same person who once believed that peace could only be found by fixing the unfixable. Now you understand that peace often comes by walking away from the storm, not trying to stand in the middle of it, holding an umbrella for two. Use this phrase when someone repeatedly oversteps, when conversations always turn into traps, when your energy shrinks in their presence, when their closeness feels more like surveillance than connection. And if they can't respect your space, they don't deserve your closeness. Because space isn't just about silence, it's about clarity. It's how you hear yourself again. It's how you begin to live without waiting for someone else's approval to exhale. So you say it softly. Let's agree to keep some space. And then you take it. Unapologetically. Because no one deserves more access to your life than they've earned through consistency, respect, and reciprocity. And if they can't meet you there, you'll be over here, breathing freely, living peacefully, unreachable by chaos. You say, I don't take that personally. And it's like you've suddenly removed the fuel from their fire. They throw the bait. You don't bite. They prod. You don't flinch. They drop subtle digs wrapped in faux concern. And you? You smile gently, shrug, and say it. I don't take that personally. It lands like a whisper, but hits like thunder. Because narcissists thrive on reaction. They sharpen their words hoping you'll bleed self-doubt. They twist your tone into accusations. They poke and prod and push all in the name of seeing you crack. But when you don't, when you stand still like a mountain while they try to shake your leaves, everything falls apart. This phrase isn't just a boundary, it's emotional bulletproofing. There's a timeless Stoic truth behind it, and it comes from Epictetus. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. You can't control their words, but you can master your response. And sometimes the most radical act of self-protection is simply not reacting at all. Let's play out the scene. You're at a family dinner. Someone says something snide. Well, not everyone needs a healing journey to get over their issues. You feel that familiar sting, that reflex to jump in, to defend your progress, to explain why your boundaries matter. But you don't. You sip your drink, you smile, you breathe. I don't take that personally. Suddenly, the air shifts. Because they didn't get what they came for. They didn't get to pull you into the spiral. They didn't get the scene. All they got was silence, and the echo of their own projection. And that's the magic. See, when you stop taking their comments personally, you stop acting like their words are reflections of your truth. They're not. They're reflections of their wounds, their fears, their control issues. But you've stopped letting their inner chaos color your calm. You stop responding to insults like they're invitations. Here is the hard question. Whose words have I been carrying for years that were never mine to hold? Maybe it was a parent who always made you feel small. A partner who projected their insecurities onto your decisions. A boss who criticized you in front of others, always under the guise of just being honest. And every time, you took it in. You absorbed it like it was gospel, but it never was. When you say, I don't take that personally, you're not being dismissive. You're being discerning. You're recognizing the difference between feedback meant to help and commentary meant to harm. You're no longer the emotional sponge soaking up other people's leaks. You've become waterproof. This phrase is also elegant because it doesn't escalate anything. It's not sarcastic. It's not defensive. It's not, well, you're wrong. It's just a clear refusal to carry their projection home in your pocket. And it's liberating. Because once you stop internalizing their drama, you stop performing damage control. You stop rehearsing the perfect comeback in the shower. You stop shrinking to make them feel better. Instead, you walk away clean. This doesn't mean you never feel the sting. It means you stop letting that sting shape your identity. You acknowledge it. You breathe through it. And you move on. It's emotional aikido, letting their energy pass through you without getting stuck in you. You say, I don't take that personally, and you mean it. When they say you're too cold, you don't take it personally. When they say you're not the same anymore, you don't take it personally. When they mock your silence, your healing, your joy, you don't take it personally. Because here is what you've learned. People don't see you as you. They see you as a mirror of their own discomfort. And when you change, when you rise, when you set boundaries, that reflection becomes unbearable. But that's their journey, not yours. You're no longer the scapegoat. You're no longer their emotional canvas. You've taken your worth out of their vocabulary. So next time someone throws a dart dressed as a compliment, or a joke that cuts a little too deep, or a suggestion that smells like control, pause, smile, say it slowly. I don't take that personally, and feel the weight lift. Because you not rejecting connection, you rejecting the idea that other people as pain should define your peace. You found something stronger than approval, self-containment. You found a way to walk through the world untangled. And in doing so, you've become what every narcissist fears most: a person who is immune to emotional bait. Someone who doesn't break when pushed. Someone who doesn't fold when criticized. Someone who simply doesn't take it personally. You say, that's your opinion, and the air goes still, not because you're being rude, but because you've just declined to enter their reality. You didn't fight. You didn't flail. You didn't defend yourself into exhaustion. You just acknowledged their statement for what it is: an opinion, not a command, not a prophecy, not the truth chiseled in marble. Just words, just theirs, not yours. And the moment you say it with calm certainty, that's your opinion, you reclaim your inner quiet. Because when you're dealing with a narcissist, you learn quickly. They speak in absolutes. They're always right. You're always wrong. They know what's really going on. They know what you meant by that. They speak like gods on mountaintops. But when you remind them They're just a person with an opinion. That's heresy to their ego, and that's exactly why it works. You don't need to argue with them. You don't need to explain why they're wrong or how they're projecting. You simply decline their worldview. Neatly, quietly, peacefully. That's your opinion. And in that sentence, you release the belief that you need to be validated to be real. Let's step into a typical moment. You're having a conversation with someone who thinks they know you better than you know yourself. They say, "You're clearly just overreacting. You're always so emotional." Old you might have jumped into a defensive monologue. "I'm not overreacting. Here is why this matters. Here's what triggered me. Here's what you said last week." But New you breathes, smiles and says, "That's your opinion." It lands like a feather and feels like a brick, because it ends the tug of war. There is a passage from Marcus Aurelius that nails this moment. The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject. And the subject here? You. Their opinion only holds as much power as you give it. And you're done loaning out your self-worth. Because the moment you internalize their opinion as truth, you've outsourced your peace. You've handed over the steering wheel to someone who doesn't even know where you're going. So, you stop. You let them speak. You let them believe whatever version of the story helps them sleep at night. And then you say it. No drama, no snark. That's your opinion. This phrase does three powerful things at once. First, it de-escalates. You don't take the bait. You don't give them the emotional reaction they crave. Second, it creates space. You're not in the boxing ring anymore. You're up in the stands, sipping something cold, watching the game you no longer need to play. And third, it puts responsibility back where it belongs. Their opinion, their baggage, not yours to carry. Let's talk about where this shows up outside toxic relationships too. You're pitching a new idea at work. Someone rolls their eyes. That'll never work. We've tried that before. You smile. That's your opinion. You're wearing something new. Someone comments, "That's not really your color." You shrug. That's your opinion. You set a boundary. Someone accuses you. "Wow, you've changed." You nod. That's your opinion. Because guess what? You're not here to be universally understood. You're not molding yourself like clay just to match someone else's comfort zone. You're not shrinking to fit the stories others have written about you. This phrase becomes your passport out of approval addiction. It means you don't collapse every time someone questions your choices. It means you can hear disagreement without absorbing it as truth. It means their emotional tone doesn't override your internal compass. Ask yourself this now. How much of what I believe about myself is actually someone else's opinion I've been mistaken for fact? It's sobering. Because once you spot it, you start to see it everywhere. And you realize you've been carrying a backpack full of other people's insecurities dressed up as feedback. But now, every time one of those old beliefs resurfaces, you're too much. You're too sensitive. You always make things harder. You get to respond the same way. Soft voice, clear eyes. That's your opinion. And then you keep walking. No detour into guilt. No pit stop in overthinking. Just forward. Because the truth is, they're allowed to have opinions. Everyone is. But you're allowed to walk away from them. And once you start practicing this, it builds like a muscle. You become more immune, less reactive, more grounded. You don't get pulled into debates with people who confuse control with care. You don't lose sleep over conversations that weren't based in reality. You don't rehearse rebuttals to arguments that never deserved your breath. You reclaim your space, your tone, your dignity. So the next time someone tries to shrink you down with an unsolicited critique, a backhanded compliment, or a dig disguised as just being honest, you meet them with stillness. And you say it with peace. That's your opinion. Then you go on living like it never touched you. Because it didn't. You say, I don't owe you that. And instantly, the temperature in the room changes not because you were rude, but because you introduced something narcissists can't tolerate. Limits on entitlement. They were so sure you'd explain. So sure you'd justify. So sure you'd go into full performance mode, bending over backward to prove you're good, loyal, kind, not like the others. But now, you're calm, you're clear, and you're done performing. I don't owe you that. It's not a dagger, it's a release. One that cuts the invisible strings they were using to puppet your behavior. To someone who's built their world on the belief that you exist to make them comfortable, hearing, I don't owe you that, feels like betrayal. But to you, it feels like freedom. You're finally stepping out of the unspoken contract you never signed. Here's the thing. Narcissists operate from a deep sense of entitlement. They believe they deserve access to your time, your attention, your explanations, your forgiveness, your life. But entitlement only lives where permission is granted. And when you take back that permission, when you look them in the eye and say, I don't owe you that, they can't compute. Because now, they have to earn what they were once handed freely. Let's walk into a familiar moment. You've set a boundary. You said no to a favor, or chose not to engage in one of their baiting conversations. Now they come back, arms folded, eyes sharp. You owe me an explanation. You pause. Old you might have panicked, reached for logic, tried to lay it all out to avoid drama. But new you? You smile, steady. I don't owe you that. No explanation, no guilt. Just the truth, in its most distilled form. There is a line from Seneca that fits here. A mind that is anxious about future events is miserable. And I'd add so is the mind that's always managing other people's expectations. Because let's be honest, you've been trained to over-explain. Maybe it started in childhood, when you had to justify your emotions to emotionally distant parents. Maybe it was in past relationships, where silence was treated like betrayal. Maybe it is just what you've always done, fill the air with apologies and context, so no one feels uncomfortable. But now, you know better. You're not here to be understood by people who aren't interested in understanding you. You're not here to hand out emotional receipts every time you make a decision. You're not here to prove your goodness to someone who's already made up their mind. I don't owe you that. It's elegant. It's final. It's liberating. And it's not a wall. It's a door with a lock you now control. Let's go even deeper. Sometimes they'll say, after everything I've done for you? Translation, you're not allowed to change unless I approve. Or, at least give me a chance to explain myself. Translation, I need a new opening to spin the story. You don't argue. You don't attack. You don't even need to label them. You just say, I don't owe you that. Because you're not keeping score. You're keeping peace. You're no longer caught in a debt spiral of guilt, where every decision you make must be cleared by someone who only shows up to collect. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to end conversations, relationships, obligations without submitting a resignation letter written in shame. And if they press, you let them press. Let them get louder. Let them accuse you of being cold, selfish, unreasonable. Because their volume doesn't make them right. And your silence doesn't make you wrong. It makes you free. Here is a question to sit with tonight. Who am I still explaining myself to? And why do I still believe I owe them anything? The answers might sting. They might bring up memories of moments where you folded just to keep the peace. But you're not there anymore. Now, your peace is too valuable to trade for temporary comfort. You don't owe them your silence. You don't owe them your story. You don't owe them your time, or your energy, or your softness. You offer those things when they're earned, not when they're demanded. And what happens next? You start to breathe easier. You start to notice how many conversations you don't actually need to have. How many apologies you've been carrying that never belonged to you. How much of your identity was built on being digestible, agreeable, available? That version of you was survival. This version? This version is truth. So the next time someone leans in with that tone, the one that says, "You owe me," you pause, you smile, and you say it like a quiet anthem. "I don't owe you that." And then you walk away, because your peace doesn't come with a receipt. You say, "Let's not revisit that." And suddenly, the loop ends. The argument they've been circling for months, or even years, dissolves with a single graceful redirection. They blink. They pause. They fidget. Because now the theater's closed. The script's no longer running. And their favorite rerun, the one where they keep rewriting history, just got canceled. You didn't yell. You didn't storm out. You didn't explain why it was unfair, manipulative, or exhausting. You simply said, "Let's not revisit that." And in doing so, you made it clear you're no longer available for emotional archaeology. Narcissists thrive in repetition. They'll drag you back into old fights dressed up in new costumes. They'll call it closure, processing, trying to make things better. But you've been here before. You've walked this maze blindfolded. And you finally realized it doesn't lead anywhere. Just emotional exhaustion. Just circular conversations that always end with them as the misunderstood hero and you as the overreacting villain. But not this time. This time, you break the cycle. This time, you say, "Let's not revisit that." And you say it like a bouncer at the door of your own peace. Marcus Aurelius had a line that fits perfectly. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Revisiting the past with someone who only uses it to manipulate the present? That's not healing. That's self-abandonment. So you stop. Let's bring this to life. You're on a call. A narcissistic parent, ex or friend, brings up something you already resolved, or tried to. Something from 2 years ago, or maybe 10. They say, "Remember when you said that thing? I just can't get over it." You've apologized. You've explained. You've spiraled. But they keep coming back to it like it's fresh. You interrupt gently, kindly. "Let's not revisit that." No justifications, no groveling, no reopening old wounds for the sake of their emotional control. And suddenly, they're on shaky ground. They might double down. So we're just sweeping it under the rug? No, you've addressed it already. You're not in denial. You're in recovery. And recovery means refusing to dig up buried things just so someone else can re-injure you. You're not a museum for their nostalgia. You're not a courtroom for their grievances. You're a person, healing, moving forward, refusing to camp out in yesterday. Let's be honest. How many hours have you spent reliving conversations you couldn't win? Trying to phrase it better. Trying to prove your good intentions. Trying to solve a problem they don't actually want solved. Because narcissists aren't looking for resolution. They're looking for a revolving door. You say sorry. They say not enough. You explain. They twist. You clarify. They shift the goalposts. And all the while, your energy drains like a faucet left running. But now, you've learned. Now you say, "Let's not revisit that." And in doing so, you're not avoiding the past, you're honoring your present. This phrase works in so many moments. A toxic friend bringing up an argument from last month, trying to reopen the file. Let's not revisit that. Partner dragging in your past as a way to deflect their own behavior. Let's not revisit that. A family member weaponizing your mistakes every time you set a new boundary. Let's not revisit that. You'll be amazed how quickly this stops the spiral. Because it doesn't deny that it happened. It just denies them the right to keep using it against you. It says, "I've learned, I've grown, and I want to let you keep shrinking me with a version of myself that no longer exists." Here is the question that brings this home. Am I revisiting the past to heal it, or just because someone else keeps pulling me back there? Be honest. Sometimes closure is a myth. Sometimes healing means closing the door with no fanfare. No perfect resolution, just peace. And yes, you're allowed to say this phrase without permission, without waiting for them to get it, without sending a thesis explaining your choice. You say, let's not revisit that, and then you redirect. Change the subject, leave the room, end the call. You don't owe them your past, especially when all they do with it is weaponize your progress. You're not here to explain what you've already outgrown. You're not here to unpack what's already been laid to rest. You're here, now, and your present doesn't belong to yesterday's drama. So the next time they come with old footage, old stories, old jabs, breathe, stand tall. Say it soft but unshakable. Let's not revisit that. And feel how powerful it is to choose peace over performance. You say, that's not up for discussion, and everything halts because for once, you didn't leave the door cracked for negotiation. No debate, no circular arguments, no emotional tug-of-war. You just placed a firm, quiet signpost between you and their chaos, and it reads, closed. See, narcissists thrive on the illusion of control. If they can keep the conversation going, they still have a shot at bending you back into place. If they can drag it out, find an angle, loop in guilt or nostalgia or false logic, they win. Not because they're right, but because they exhausted you into surrender. But no, your sentence ends the game before it starts. That's not up for discussion. It's not cruel. It's not angry. It's just final. And to someone who's used to chipping away at your boundaries, like a woodpecker on caffeine, that's terrifying. This is stoicism in action, not the loud kind, not the gladiator kind, but the steady, grounded kind. The kind that says, I govern my own peace, and you don't get a vote. Let's look at how this plays out. A narcissistic ex keeps texting you about closure. You've already had the talk. You've already explained, multiple times. But here they are again. We need to revisit this. It's the mature thing to do. You reply, calm and clear. That's not up for discussion. No preamble. No opening act. Just the main event. A boundary wrapped in calm authority. Marcus Aurelius said, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. And what does that mean here? It means you don't have to yell. You don't have to plead. You don't have to lower yourself to emotional theatrics. You hold the line without raising your voice. Now, let's shift the lens. Imagine a family member insisting you talk about a boundary they've crossed again and again. Maybe it's your decision to spend the holidays differently. Maybe it's your refusal to tolerate gossip or passive-aggressive jabs. They push. Why can't we just talk about this? You exhale. You've tried talking. You've tried explaining. But all that ever did was give them more room to twist the narrative. So you look them in the eye. That's not up for discussion. And just like that, your energy stops leaking into black holes. Here's a key realization. Some people don't want resolution. They want rehearsals. They want you to keep showing up for scenes that should have ended seasons ago. This phrase ends the performance. It says, I no longer audition for approval. I don't co-write my truth with people who weaponize words. I have the final say in my piece. Ask yourself this. Where in my life am I still discussing things that are actually already decided? Maybe you've outgrown a dynamic, but you keep revisiting it to avoid seeming harsh. Maybe you've made a choice that's best for your mental health, but you let someone talk circles around it because they just want to understand. But deep down, you know they don't want clarity. They want control. This phrase stops that pattern cold. And yes, they'll push back. They'll try to guilt you. Wow, I guess communication means nothing to you. They'll try to shame you. You're just running away from accountability. But none of that matters. Because not up for discussion doesn't to mean you re-avoiding. It means you're done entertaining people who only show up to argue, not to grow. You've tried explaining. You've tried reasoning. You've written essays in your head and monologues in the shower. But now you choose the stillness of clarity over the noise of negotiation. This doesn't make you heartless. It makes you sovereign. It means your peace is no longer a democracy where every manipulative voice gets a vote. You become the gatekeeper of your own time, energy, and attention. Let us be real. How much time have you lost to conversations that were never about understanding, just control? How many times have you left those talks feeling smaller, more confused, more unsure of yourself? No more. From now on, when someone presses, pokes, or provokes in the name of discussion, you ask yourself, is this actually a discussion or just another attempt to wear me down? If the answer is the latter, you say it, even if your voice shakes, even if your palms sweat. That's not up for discussion. And then you walk away. Or you hang up. Or you change the subject. Or you go take a walk in the sun, feeling 10 pounds lighter. Because the truth is, freedom often arrives in the form of a full sentence. A sentence like this one. A sentence that says, you don't get to pull me into chaos just because you're uncomfortable with my clarity. You've left that game behind. And you're never going back. You say, we're done here. And it lands like a velvet hammer, soft but final. No door left open, no dots left dangling. Just the end of a sentence that used to keep dragging on. For a narcissist, that's not just uncomfortable, it's unbearable. Because ending a conversation without their permission means they've lost the stage. They're no longer directing the narrative. Their scene partner, the one who always stayed, who always argued, who always came back, has finally walked off set. And not in anger, not in tears. Just clarity. We're done here. That's not silence. That's power. It's the last breath of a battle you never wanted to fight in the first place. See, narcissists don't just want attention. They want to trap you in cycles. They want the endless loop. Provoke, defend, confuse, repeat. They don't want resolution. They want rehearsal. And every word you offer is another brick in the stage they keep rebuilding. But now, you've learned. Peace doesn't come from proving your point. It comes from walking away when you realize there is no point to prove. And that walk begins with a phrase like this. Let's step into one of those moments. You're in a text exchange that started civil but spiraled fast. They're twisting your words, making assumptions, accusing you of things you never said. You reread the thread. You feel the heat rising in your chest. You want to explain, to clarify, to fix it just one more time. But instead, you type, we're done here. And you put the phone down, not in rage, not in panic, just with peace. That's strength. There's a quote by Epictetus that fits perfectly here. When someone irritates you, it is your own response that is irritating you. Meaning it's not them. It's the trap you keep falling into, thinking this time it'll be different. This time they'll hear you. This time they'll play fair. They won't, because they can't. So instead of playing, you leave the field. You say, we're done here. And in doing so, you don't just exit the conversation, you reclaim your energy. This isn't about ghosting or being cold. It's about knowing when a moment has expired, when the cost of staying is higher than the fear of being misunderstood. Because here is the truth. The people who care about you want to need you to bleed out your boundaries to prove your love. The people who don't, they'll try to make you feel guilty for protecting your sanity. Let them. Let them call you cold, distant, unreasonable. That's their script, not yours. You're writing something new now. And the first line of that new chapter might just be, we redone here. Let's look at where this shows up beyond personal relationships. In work settings, a client crosses the line again and again. You've explained your policies. You've compromised. You've bent backward. They demand more. You say, we're done here. In friendships, Someone keeps taking but never giving. You've addressed it gently. They deny, deflect, or distract. You say, "We're done here." Even in family dynamics, someone constantly gaslights you, dismisses your feelings, crosses boundaries with a smile. You say it quietly, but you say it. "We're done here." Because your peace doesn't require a permission slip, and you don't need to earn your exit from relationships that run on guilt, not grace. Here is a question that hits deep. What have I kept alive out of habit that has long been dead in spirit? Think about the conversations you've had 10, 20, 50 times. The moments you left feeling drained, small, unsettled. The people you stuck around for, just because they've always been in my life. But here is the Stoic twist. Just because something is familiar doesn't mean it is good for you. Just because it's been long doesn't mean it should last. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them is end the loop. No fireworks, no finale. Just a simple, unshakable, "We're done here." That phrase doesn't slam the door. It closes it gently, with a quiet finality that says, "I'm not angry. I'm just done giving my time to what won't grow." And if they try to re-enter the conversation, if they send a follow-up jab, a guilt trip, a just one more thing, you don't re-engage. You don't restart the engine of over-explaining. You just remember, we already finished this scene. You're not a sequel. You're a new story. One where you don't spend pages defending your right to peace. So yes, you say it. Say it when the loop starts again. Say it when the game resets. Say it when your silence starts shaking their comfort. "We're done here." And mean it with everything you've grown through. You say, "This conversation no longer serves me." And it's not drama, it's dignity. You're not storming out. You're not slamming doors. You're simply naming the truth of the moment with clean precision. Because at some point, you realize, not all conversations are worth your presence. Not every argument deserves your breath. And not every relationship is supposed to come with an endless stream of second chances. This conversation no longer serves me. It's the grown-up version of turning the page. Not bitter. Not cruel. Just done. Because narcissists will keep you locked in dialogue forever. It's their playground, their battlefield, their therapy session where you do all the emotional labor. They'll call it connection. They'll call it working through things. But you can feel the fatigue setting in the way your chest tightens every time you see their name light up your phone. The way your energy drops after every exchange. That's not a coincidence. That's your nervous system whispering, "This isn't safe anymore." And when you honor that truth, when you stop measuring your strength by how long you can endure discomfort, you become what they fear most, untouchable. This phrase isn't just about conversations. It's about cycles. It's about patterns that keep pretending to be progress. It's about finally understanding that if talking to someone feels like emotional debt, it's okay to cut the line. There is a quote from Seneca that hits like a thunderclap here. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Wasted how? Explaining things to people who aren't listening. Justifying boundaries to people who never respected them. Repeating lessons someone refuses to learn. That's not communication. That's captivity. And now, you're choosing liberation. Imagine this moment. You're mid-conversation. You've said the same sentence 3 different ways. They still don't hear it. They shift the goalposts. They pivot, accuse, deflect. You pause. Old you would have kept going, thinking if I can just find the right words, but new you breathes, softly, and says, "This conversation no longer serves me." And you end it. Not out of anger, not out of ego, out of self-respect, because your time is sacred. Your peace is currency. And the moment you realize you're bleeding both in the name of politeness, you pull back and you heal. Here's the question to sit with, slowly. Which conversations am I still participating in just because I'm afraid to leave? Let the truth surface gently. You may find you've been keeping old arguments alive because part of you feared what silence would mean. But silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's choosing not to wrestle with people who only know how to provoke, not resolve. And it's choosing to redirect that energy inward toward joy, toward calm, toward the life you're building without the noise. This phrase isn't a wall. It's a threshold. It tells the world, I've done what I can here. I'm leaving this space with grace, not resentment, but I am leaving. You'll be shocked how few words it takes to reclaim your power. Because sometimes the strongest sentence in the world is a goodbye without a war. And if they don't like it, if they try to guilt you, chase you, paint you as the villain, let them. You don't need to stay to correct their narrative. You don't need to break yourself apart to be seen as whole in someone else's story. You simply say it, and you walk away. This conversation no longer serves me. And in doing so, you end not just a moment, but a pattern. And you start something quieter, deeper, freer. Something like peace. You made it. And not just through the words, but through 100 little memories that surfaced along the way. Moments when you stayed too long, argued too hard, bent too far. But look at you now. Sitting here in this stillness you've carved for yourself. One quiet truth at a time. You didn't need to scream. You didn't need to retaliate. You just needed to remember what the Stoics knew all along, that power isn't loud. It's calm. It's in the pause before the response. It's in the decision to walk away instead of explain. It's in knowing that not every storm deserves your presence. So let tonight be a gentle turning point. Let it be the moment you stopped feeding conversations that only ever made you smaller. You don't owe anyone your peace just because they demand your attention. You don't have to stay in the room just to prove you're kind. You're allowed to protect your silence like treasure. And you're allowed to walk away calm, quiet, whole. So take a breath. Let your jaw unclench. Soften your shoulders. And remember, you're not responsible for how others receive your peace. You're only responsible for guarding it. Sleep easy tonight, warrior. You've said what needed saying. The rest doesn't need to be said at all.